Is it going to come tomorrow? Is it going to come next week? No, the time for justice, the time for freedom, and the time for equality is always right now.
You're listening to another Perspective Talk Show.
Hello. This is Sam, a.k.a. Lucy Bones.
This show is brought to you by Rebirth Radio.
Something said, something done within the community feeds into the stereotype, feeds into the prejudice.
Shadow. Radio.
I think more community involvement could be beneficial in teaching people about budgeting, income, and how to save, and multiple streams of income. And
you're listening to another Perspective Talk Show.
Hello. This is Sam, a.k.a. Lucy Bones. I'm coming to you live at this very moment. I'm coming to you with a lot of pressing things that involve the community as a whole, but the Black community is especially impacted by some of these things. First, let me say that I am a contributor to the former Rebirth magazine, Dear Black People, and I am now the contributor, Dear Black People of Rebirth Radio. Hello. So, some of these things are going to get a lot of people angry, and that's okay. We need to be angry. We need to sit with how we feel about some of these topics for a minute, and then seriously think about how we can change our views, the views of others, how to promote understanding. I know we can't change people for people, but we can be some of the moving pieces that are the catalyst for those changes that we look to see. I know I stated that in my description of the show that we may have a guest. She will have to be postponed to another show. So there you have it. So I want to look at mental health, substance abuse disorder, gender fluidity, sexual orientation, reentry status, low income versus moderate and high income, street background, and other various issues facing society as a whole, and why in particular the effects are critically damaging to the Black community. And I hope that we can look for ways to improve some of the symptoms, failures of the current ways to treat some of the things, community perception, and perception of others looking from the outside in. I can only report what's been told to me by community members. I don't have community members this particular broadcast to contribute. However, they have contributed to me in our daily conversations and my daily lives. I do work in substance abuse and mental health, and I come across a diverse group of individuals who are residing in their own reality in their life within these categories. So let's start with mental health. Mental health is a big one. You know, for some people, mental health symptoms are all in your head. They're not experienced necessarily by symptoms of the body, but symptoms of the brain and behavior and eccentricities, or what someone might say is an oddity. And for others, it's experienced as symptoms, physical illness and symptoms within the body. There are a lot of older folks, old school people, who, when they become anxious or depressed or deeply hurt and sad or traumatized, They might have stomach upsets, headaches, bowel issues, might run a low-grade fever. Their back might ache. Their joints might start acting up. Those are physical ways the body is starting to let people know about. Those are physical ways the body is being, your mind is letting your body know, hey, there's something going on in here. You're ignoring this. Because let's face it, there is still a lot of stigma within the Black community, right? Regarding mental health. And, the Black community already has a lot of pressure on it to adhere to certain standards set by a society that's not Black. And people in the Black community already have to be on eggshells when they interact with certain different groups within the larger community. Certain different systems, institutional systems, as well as personal systems like the education system and church systems and things like that. If you don't belong to an all-Black church, well, or maybe let's say the beat of your drum, your soul really identifies with this one church, which is predominantly white, but they accept you as a Black person, but still you have to mold into certain cultural norms. You're already fighting those things. So adding a flaw, or what some in the community identify to me as a deficit or a flaw, can be really troubling and magnify some of the symptoms, because you don't want to identify with it. You don't want to own it. You want to push it away because you already have so much to deal with just with skin color alone. And skin color really nowadays shouldn't matter like it does, but it does. It does to the Black community. And that's what I hear every single day from not only my children who are biracial, but from friends, family members, and community members who I interact with on a daily basis. I try to surround myself with people who are willing to share their experiences with me, because I think it's important to know. I think it's important to be aware of these things. Now, let me say, mental health, untreated mental health, can lead to further stigma within the community. Oh, he's a Black man. He's probably smoking crack and probably mentally ill, schizophrenic, or this or that. Did you see Jamie Foxx in that movie where he plays the violin as a homeless man? They automatically identify with some movie or some characterization instead of identifying with, hey, you know what? I knew somebody in my college class that had mental illness, was a member of the Black community, and they were doing fine. You never hear anybody talking about that. It's always a negative. It's always in the negative that people discuss people within the community, right? So the community doesn't want to deal with it. It doesn't want to own it. And I think in recent years, there has been a push from Black pastors and Black educators and within the Black community for Black community members to erase some of the stigma so that people will get help. And I definitely appreciate this, because I think it's important to start erasing the stigma. It's important to look at things from a whole person's standpoint. And that's the other thing. That's the other thing about this. The ways that we look at treating some of these things for the Black community, they're not necessarily culturally specific or even culturally sensitive, for that matter. If you cannot, it's great to have a treatment system. It's great to have a program. It's great to have something that helps people. But when you want to advertise or recruit or try to assist people of certain community members, of certain racial and ethnic backgrounds, you need to make sure that what you're teaching is culturally and socially acceptable within their circles. Because otherwise, it's going to fail. Why? Because while they're in treatment, while they're getting the help, while they're doing what they need to do, either imposed by law enforcement, voluntary, family members pushing, community members pushing for this individual to get a certain type of help, while they're there, it works because they're living, breathing, and assimilating into that environment. But when they go home, or when they go back to real life, if that community, if that environment, if that social circle, if the people that immediately surround and support that community member with their mental health, with their recovery efforts from substance abuse disorder, if that's not acceptable within the community, if that's not feasible, doable, it's not going to happen. And this person is not fully supported and not fully prepared to live a life in recovery from mental health or substance abuse disorder because the individual providing the services failed to see what is important to this person's social circle, this person's community. Where do they want to go when they get out? Are they going to go back to the exact same place they were at? Do they want to relocate? What kind of programming do they want after the initial programming is done? And it's not about, sometimes when the courts are involved, probation's involved, there's a commitment, etc. Sometimes, those things are based on recommendations and they have to do whatever you say. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to have somebody who has a choice in the matter. They're grown, they have a choice. And we need to be aware of what those choices are and encouraging, giving them tools to remain in the well state that they are in, because the mind-body connection is mind-blowing. You hear me? My dear, beautiful Black people, my brothers and sisters, my beloved, listen to me. The mind-body connection is mind-blowing because what you think, you do, and you feel. And if you think something long enough, it becomes your reality. Now imagine if you have the added thought disruptions of certain types of mental illness diagnoses. And it's okay not to own the diagnoses. It's okay to say that doesn't make you who you are, or even addiction. The mind processes of someone in addiction, that's not themselves thinking and talking, that's the drugs thinking and talking. That's the alcohol thinking and talking on their brain. They have to be without a substance for at least 28 to 30 days for you to even start seeing them. And depending how frequently, how much, and how long they've used any kind of substances, it may take longer. And the damages to their brain, some of them might not reverse. They may be a little bit changed. And their thinking might not be all the way altogether. But that's okay, because if you know that going into it with somebody, if they're willing to share their story, their testimony, they're overcoming with you, and you get to know that about a person, you know how to interact with them. You can pick up on those things, and you can help support them in strengthening them. They may not fully be able to overcome certain pieces, but you can strengthen them so that it's not necessarily a barrier. Now, there are children in the community who don't think that it's okay to share their feelings, to get help for the things that they feel. And there's a lot of pressure on Black youth, not only from peer pressure and substance abuse issues to mental health issues, and just society, community expectations. Some come from single-parent families, single fathers, single mothers. And they have to face all the pressures and the realities and the responsibilities that being a child in one of those households has. And I said one of those not out of disrespect or disdain for those type of households. I'm saying that because being in a married household with two married parents or a two-parent household, period, is much more different than it is having two single parents, right? And some of those situations, they only see one of their parents. They don't even see both their parents sometimes. Anyway, moving on. Gender fluidity, sexual orientation. Man, this is a tough one, okay? If you're already dealing with, my beautiful, beloved brothers and sisters, if you're already dealing with being black, right? You hear driving while black, walking while black, sitting in my yard with my friends while being black. You hear all these things happening just because of skin color, right? Think about gender fluidity and sexual orientation. Think about being a black man who is gay, who has contracted HIV, who might have substance abuse and mental health issues. Or think about being a black woman who identifies as lesbian or bisexual, or maybe you are agender and you're bisexual, but you're agender. You don't identify with either gender. You just are who you are. You accept yourself for the masculine and feminine traits that you have and use them because you don't feel one or the other. Preferred pronouns, they, them, he, she, is really important, especially nowadays, to understand the pressures, the complex, layered pressures. Like someone can't simply just be a gay man. He has to be a black gay man, or a black gay man with HIV, a black gay man with XYZ, or a black woman with XYZ. It can't simply just be who they are. It has to be labeled to death. It's crazy with labels, right? In the community, there's really no safe place. The community doesn't like certain things because there's certain roots within the community generationally that reject certain aspects of a person. When there's some gender fluidity and sexual orientation that is outside the normative for the circle you run in, right? So there's some pushback in that you'll have men in your circle talking about, if you're female, talking about, oh, hey, if you get with me, I can turn you back. Or if you're a man, like, hey, why don't you just get married and, do this thing. Once you get a woman, you'll be fine. Stop being chicken. And that's part of the problem. We don't accept each other. We always want, the black community talks about, as a community, it talks about not being accepted, not being valued, not being tolerated, not being respected as a community. People pigeonhole them, put them in the corner, and put the community in the corner and put everything on the community and stereotype this, that, and the other. But then this is what's going on within the same community. From experience, people should realize how it feels, because just being in the black community, you're experiencing a lot of that already. So I think as a community, we could do better, guys. We could do better identifying, hey, this person is experiencing stigma everywhere else in their life. It shouldn't happen with us. It shouldn't happen within our community. And so I think people find their little niches and cliques, and I don't think people fully get supported. We talk a lot about fully supporting one another, but I don't really see it being completely implemented. But I love the effort and I love the energy, guys. I do. Now, let's talk about reentry. Well, people go away for a lot of reasons, right? They get put up for a lot of reasons. Some of them aren't good. Some of them are a case of false identification and false imprisonment. And some of them are, hey, they did the crime, they did the time. Now, the society, they have a second sentence. You can't get a job. You can't vote for a while, maybe, depending on your crime. You can't bear arms, depending on your crime, for a while. There's a whole lot you can't do. It's a whole list of can'ts in barely an inch of what you can. So you have to try to figure out a way to work within the cans to make your life work, except there's not a whole lot of network for the reentry population, especially within the Black community, because there's already that stigma out there within the other communities that interact with the Black community. There's already that stigma, the racism, the prejudice, and the assumptions, the stereotypes that follow you around. And then you say, oh, I'm a reentry person. I'm paroled or I'm on probation. And immediately, think about the streets of Chicago, New York, LA, those shops that line the street. That big metal gate comes all the way down and locks you outside. Every time you turn around, and people are forced back to a lifestyle because they can't make any other lifestyle because they're stuck. They are forced, which is absolutely ridiculous. It is unacceptable. I think we need, as a larger community, we need to make more opportunities, and we need to accept that there are people that have a past. And as long as they serve their sentences and they are free, we need to realize that that's their past. Now, there are certain crimes, like very violent crimes, crimes against women and children, things like that, that maybe we shouldn't overlook and get past. And I'm going to say even some of those, we need to understand the circumstances. Like if somebody's 17 and had a 15-year-old girlfriend, they could be charged as a sex offender. And it's more likely to happen in the Black community when a Black community member has a relationship with a white community member and this person gets tagged for the rest of their life. They might do some jail time for months to a couple years and get out and forever have this weight over them. So we really need to look at the description of the crime and what, because when there's a statute, when they're charged with crimes, it's the best thing that most fits what they're doing. It doesn't necessarily describe exactly what happened. And I think that's where we need to be sensitive and figure it out, and maybe even create specific programs within companies, specific job titles and roles for reentry people so that people can become stable and not have to turn back to the life that got them in prison in the first place in some cases. There are agencies like Ex-Offenders Resource Network and Twin Cities Rise and other agencies that are good agencies that are helping people reenter. Another issue is the income disparity. There are extremely poor people in the Black community, and then there are people that are in the moderate and high income brackets. And it's like when you meet somebody within each of the socioeconomic classes, there are vast differences in how they articulate themselves, how they dress, who they hang around, what their education is, how they conduct themselves. And there's not really any outside of being Black community members, there's not really any overarching strings of similarity within these different socioeconomic groups. There's no roadmap necessarily from people who are successful, who are living comfortably with the moderate and high incomes, to go back into the community to the low-income people and say, hey, here's how I did it. I was just like you. I don't see a whole lot of that happening. I've seen some like TED Talks and YouTube videos and things like that with people trying, but in reality, in many low-income households, they don't have internet. They go to the library for it or school. So how many people are really going to have the experience of a TED Talk and YouTube? So I think more community involvement could be beneficial in teaching people about budgeting and income and how to save and multiple streams of income and, you know, legit versus non-legit opportunity, you know, turn their talents into money. And then these are so, and street background. People assume that because you have a little bit of street background, right, that you are no good, you're always going to be this way, or, hey, you just criminalistic, you can't be trusted. That's not true. Some people do what they do to survive and get through that portion of their life, make it out to the other side so that they can get somewhere. They have a vision and a goal. Some people just stay there, sure. But a lot of times what I've come across is people just getting from point A to point B, and that was in the way. That's the obstacle course they had to make it through to get to point B, and they did it. And I know plenty of people who had to do what they had to do and do not have a criminal record because they did what they had to do and they got on with their lives. It wasn't a lifestyle. It was a choice that they couldn't avoid. So let's be careful about how we characterize people based on their past. Let's give them merits for who they are as an individual as they present to you in front of you. Be aware, sure, but don't judge them and hold them to that standard when they are coming at you from a completely different standard. Now, ways we can improve some of these things is a better communication within the community and outside the community and with the community. We need other communities to interact in a positive way. We need the community, the Black community, to be receptive to people coming in and maybe educating more. We're helping to erase the stigma, learning how that is possible within the Black community. How do we break some of these generational thoughts and premises within the Black community to accept people as they are with some of these afflictions? How do we get over some of the hurdles we cause ourselves in these things? And then, you know, some of the current ways, like I said, they're not culturally specific. We need more culturally specific and sensitive options that value an individual's rights to be autonomous and make their own decisions, but also what they desire their life to look like. And the questions ought to be, how does this support my well-being? Is this a choice that supports it or hurts it? And if it supports it, how does it support it? And how can I get there? You know, I think that's one of the biggest questions we need to have. You know, we're running out of time here. We're about 1 minute and 30 seconds down. I really appreciate you for listening in. I'd like to open up for callers next time when we get down to about 10 minutes left of the program. I'd like to go down to answer calls, take thoughts, opinions, pushback. Yes, pushback. And believe me, I come from a place of love, my brothers and sisters, my beloved. I come from complete love and light, and I bring that with you. And I bring up these topics because I hear them day in and day out. I see them. My children experience them. My friends, my family members experience them. I've lived in a community for a really long time that has experienced these issues, and I bring them up to make them relevant and to keep them alive so that we can talk about them and make things better for ourselves and others. This is not personal. This is not negative. I want to say I love you all and be good to one another.
You're listening to another Perspective Talk Show.
Shadow. Radio.
This show is brought to you by Rebirth Radio.